Part of a SpaceX rocket crashed into the moon this morning, causing a blast roughly equivalent to 3 tons of TNT. The Falcon 9 was launched 19 months ago, but it unintentionally veered towards the moon. The collision had not been planned, but researchers thought it was a good opportunity to learn more about the lunar surface. Dr. Jennifer Millard is an astronomer at Fifth Star Labs. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It didn't mean to hit the moon. What happened?
So it's because this was left on a trajectory orbiting Earth and then on a path that intersects with lunar orbit. So when we deploy things towards the moon, unless we then actively take action to put them in orbit, say around the sun in a coincidental orbit with Earth, then they maintain a very similar orbit to the objects that they deployed. And there wasn't enough fuel on board this time to make any changes. And so this SpaceX rocket has been in orbit around the Earth on a wide elliptical orbit. It's intersected with the moon's orbit, and they arrived at that crossover point. And when you get those two bodies at that crossover point at the same time, a collision is inevitable.
There's only going to be one winner, which I guess was the moon. But
Yeah.
it highlights this issue of space debris. I mean, there are these kind of online maps you can look at which just show the kind of space outside, around the Earth, just filled with junk. And it amazes me that there aren't more collisions. You know, you've got these satellites in orbit, but if you're hit by a tiny screw in space, it can cause catastrophic damage. How on earth can we manage this space debris?
It's a huge question, and we don't have all of the answers for it at the minute. So there's about 18,800 active satellites up there at the minute. And then we've got a couple thousand which are defunct. We've got tens of thousands of bits of debris that we're tracking as well. It's a bit of a mess. You know, that's debris that we can track. There are many, many smaller fragments which are just simply too small for us to follow. And so there are bits of research being done into perhaps cannibalizing defunct satellites to then fix them in space, to have reusable satellites as well. That's an option. And there's kind of a few more regulations in space for low Earth orbit, where at the end of their lives, satellites have to, for example, burn up, or they have to be put into safe orbit to try and protect that environment. But it is a growing problem. You know, we've got licenses for some companies like SpaceX. They want to launch 1 million satellites, and every time you deploy a satellite, there are these pins and screws and little springs and things that just go on out into space, and they can cause issues. So yeah, we don't have all of the answers, but there is a lot of research being done into it because it is a growing problem.
I mean, do we need to change what we do and design objects that are going to be less prone to lose the old screw and spring, and also make it sort of mandatory that when that object is redundant, it is somehow disposed of safely, taken out of a particular orbit, for example?
Yeah, I think that the way we deploy satellites, we have to think a little bit more carefully about it. And we do have to make sure that there are proper rules and regulations in place for the end of satellites' lives, because there are some, but there's certainly not enough. And then there aren't enough laws and regulations as to what happens if your satellite does smash into another one and break it into tens of thousands of pieces. You know, what happens then? Whose responsibility is it when they've created this great big debris cloud? It's not always clear. And we also have satellites, you know, they're fitted with little engines so that they can move out of the way of other satellites. And we're seeing more and more often this has to happen. You know, SpaceX, they execute thousands of these maneuvers every single year already to avoid other satellites and to avoid bits of space debris. The International Space Station, although it has a very wide kind of safe zone around it, it has to move pretty regularly as well, just to make sure that it stays safe. So yeah, I totally agree with you. We need to change the way we're operating in low Earth orbit for sure.
Thanks so much. That's Dr. Jennifer Millard, an astronomer at Fifth Star Labs. She's also the presenter of the Awesome Astronomy podcast, which I'm sure is excellent.
Now, a fragment of a SpaceX rocket has crashed into the moon. The Falcon 9 rocket was launched by Elon Musk company last year, and the segment detached from the rocket and was expected to stay in Earth's atmosphere until an American astronomer noticed it was on a collision course with the moon. Now, the fragment was expected to hit the lunar surface at more than 5,000 miles an hour at around breakfast time, our time this morning, and scientists are busy fixing their telescopes telescopes on the crash site near the Einstein crater on the moon to try to find out exactly what has happened. Let's talk to Dr. Matt Bothwell, who's an astronomer at the University of Cambridge. First of all, Dr. Bothwell, were you concerned at about 7:30 this morning, our time?
Not at all. I was hopeful that we might see a fun little explosion or something. But yeah, it was never going to be a danger or anything like that.
Right. And how were you so sure of exactly that?
Well, it's fairly big, in terms of like human scale. It's about the size of a bus. But it's like, cosmically speaking, it's pretty tiny. It's a little thing weighing a few tons, hitting a rock about 380,000 kilometers away. This kind of thing happens like reasonably often. Like, space is pretty busy. It's full of rocks and debris and stuff, and impacts like this do happen from time to time. The scale of the impact just isn't anything like the kind of thing that would affect us here on Earth.
Okay, how can you explain that we seem to know exactly at what speed this segment or fragment was going to hit the moon? We keep being quoted this figure of 5,400 miles an hour. How on earth do we know?
It's just because we have lots of observations of this thing. We just have a very good understanding of its orbit. People track space debris all the time. We know exactly where this rocket came from. We know exactly how it's been orbiting around the moon. We just have a very, very good description of its path and speed, basically.
I see. Okay. It still boggles most of our minds, I have to say, that we could be so accurate. You seem very, very calm about the whole thing.
I think mind-boggling is right. It is amazing. Even more accurately, we track the speed of satellites orbiting around the Earth, down to an accuracy of millimeters per second. And that's compared to these things flying around at 20,000 kilometers per hour, right? I think just these days we have very, very, very sensitive instruments, which is important. We need to know what our satellites are doing. We have people in space in the International Space Station. We need to know how everything is behaving. And luckily, these days, we have the tech to do it.
Why did this particular bit of the rocket leave the Earth's atmosphere?
All rockets sort of leave the Earth's atmosphere, right? That's what they're designed to do. So this rocket, this Falcon 9, was depositing a lander on the surface of the moon. And the way rockets work is they kind of go up in one bit, but then as they get towards their final destination, they sort of discard the spent fuel tanks. Basically for weight reasons. You don't need to be lugging a big empty fuel tank around when fuel in space is so expensive. And so this is just a sort of discarded empty fuel tank, launched last year as part of this mission to put a lander on the moon. And since then, it's just been sort of looping around the Earth-Moon system, and just little gravitational nudges caused by the Earth and the Moon eventually put it on a collision course with the Moon.
Some of our listeners, just instinctively, they don't like the cut of Elon Musk's jib, frankly. They'd like to blame him for, anything and everything. Does he carry any blame, in speech marks, for what's happened today?
I think, lots of things that Elon Musk is doing is controversial. I think a lot of astronomers like me are not fans of his Starlink program, this mission to put, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of satellites in orbit around the Earth, which is going to be, an absolute nightmare for people that want to study the night sky when you have this sort of busy swarm of satellites getting in the way. I think it's something like this, though, this rocket impact. I don't think blame is really the right word. It's one of these things that, empty rocket parts are occasionally going to fly around and hit something. And if anything, it's quite a fun learning opportunity. We get to actually study the inside of the moon and learn a bit about the moon's surface as a result of this impact. I was saying before, stuff hits the moon all the time, but this is a rare case where we know exactly the size and the speed of the thing that's going to collide. And so it makes for a nice controlled experiment. And so when we look at the whole afterwards, that's going to tell us a lot about how the moon reacts to things landing on it. It's really valuable information. So when will people like you be able to see those images? I think in a coming week or so. So I think NASA has a lunar orbiter, so it's a satellite orbiting around the moon, taking pictures of the moon's surface, and it's due to pass over the impact site in about a week's time. So we should get a really nice before and after, and sort of know how the moon responds to being clobbered by a bit of rocket like this.
Yeah. Well, it's covered in craters, isn't it, the moon? And this impact was set to occur near the so-called Einstein crater. Do we know what created that? Because I gather that's enormous.
It is. It would have been a big rock from space. I mean, so the moon, like you said, absolutely covered in craters. Some of them are genuinely huge. There's the South Pole Basin, which is something like 2,000 kilometers across. The interesting thing, the reason for all these craters is because the moon doesn't have an atmosphere, it doesn't have any air. So anything that hits the moon leaves a crater, and then that just stays forever. Like on Earth, craters are eroded away by wind and rain over millions of years. But with the moon, if something hits the moon, you come back a billion years later, that little scar is still there. So that's why people say Neil Armstrong's footprints are going to be there for the next, for millions and millions of years. So yeah, that's why the moon is covered in craters, because every single thing that's hit it over its 4.5 billion year history has left a mark.
Gosh, that's thought-provoking. Thank you very much indeed for your time. That's Dr. Matt Bothwell, who's an astronomer at Cambridge University.